They say monsters aren't born, they're made. And what if I told you that one of WWE's most terrifying creations, the Big Red Machine, the Brother of Destruction, wasn't just a fictional nightmare, but the result of real pain, real rejection, and a boy who never quite belonged? This isn't just about wrestling. This is the story of how pain shapes legends and how Glenn Jacobs became Kane. Glenn's early life was like living in the shadows of ghosts. Born into a military family, his father served over 2 decades, including 2 brutal wars. But this dedication to country came at a cost. Glenn barely saw him. With every move from one base to another, Glenn was always the new kid, the tall, awkward outcast. School hallways became arenas of cruelty, and he couldn't hide from the ridicule. "I stuck out like a sore thumb," he later recalled. These early scars left a mark deeper than anyone could see. Yet somewhere in that loneliness, a fire ignited. Glenn found temporary relief in sports. Basketball and football offered a way to fight back, to belong. He bulked up naturally, avoiding weight training out of fear of losing agility. He dreamed big of becoming a pro athlete and even earned a university scholarship. But fate had other plans. During a routine play, Glenn's cleat got stuck and his knee twisted violently, a torn ACL. Just like that, everything crumbled. After months of depression, a flicker of hope appeared, an NFL tryout. But when he arrived in Chicago, they took one look at his medical report and sent him home without a second glance. That trip back was one of the most devastating moments of my life, he admitted. For weeks, Glenn couldn't leave his room. He felt broken, discarded. His dream had died, but something darker was about to be born. He pivoted to nursing, working in a mental hospital with disabled patients, doing what he could to survive. But every time a football game came on, the ache returned. He wanted more than just a job. He wanted a purpose. And then, on a quiet night shift, everything changed. Watching WWE with a friend, he heard the words, "You could do that." That moment sparked something he hadn't felt in years: hope. And when he learned that his idol, Dean Malenko, ran a wrestling school in Florida, Glenn packed his bags. But the road to WWE wasn't paved in gold. It was lined with humiliation. His early matches were in barns. His first gimmick? A green, glittering disaster called the Christmas Creature, complete with battery-powered lights sewn in by his mother. Even now, Glenn cringes at the memory, but he didn't quit. He couldn't. From there, he transformed into Unabomb, a red-masked demon of destruction in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Slowly, he built a reputation, not as a clown, but as a relentless force of nature. He finally started working with wrestling veterans like Jim Cornette and Al Snow, learning the art of psychology, storytelling, and crowd control. Wrestling wasn't just punches and slams, it was theater. And for an English major with a love for Shakespearean drama, it was the perfect outlet. Wrestling saved him from despair. But what really changed his fate was The Undertaker. In 1995, Glenn faced The Undertaker in a match that changed everything. Mark Calloway saw something in him, something raw, unrefined, but powerful. After the match, he told Vince McMahon, "We need this guy." Soon, Glenn was brought into WWE, but not as a monster. Instead, he debuted as Isaac Yankem, the evil dentist, a gimmick that Glenn later called more humiliating than his knee injury. Still, he played along, grateful for the opportunity. But deep down, he knew he was meant for more. He survived the dreadful dentist phase. He even played a fake version of Diesel when Kevin Nash left for WCW. None of it felt right. But it gave him confidence that he belonged. And then, the world shifted. When Vader was arrested on live television in Kuwait, WWE suddenly needed a new unstoppable villain to feud with The Undertaker. That's when the idea of Kane was born, a long-lost brother, disfigured in a funeral home fire, raised by the villainous Paul Bearer. The idea was insane. The risk? Massive. But for Glenn, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Over the next few months, WWE built the anticipation brick by brick. Paul Bearer whispered ominous threats. "He's alive, Undertaker. Your brother Kane is coming." Then it happened. At Bad Blood 1997, during the first ever Hell in a Cell match, the lights dropped. Flames shot from the stage, and a masked giant ripped the steel door from its hinges. "That's got to be Kane," screamed Jim Ross. It wasn't just an entrance, it was an earthquake in WWE history. Kane had arrived, and the world would never be the same again. But what came next? What kind of monster had WWE unleashed? Why did this man wear a mask? What horrors had shaped him into the big red machine? To find out, you'll have to follow the fire. From the moment Kane ripped the door off Hell in a Cell, WWE was never the same. He wasn't just a villain, he was an unstoppable myth, a silent force cloaked in rage and fire. But behind that towering mask, Glenn Jacobs was facing a new war, proving he wasn't just another monster in someone else's story, but the hero of his own. Kane's debut was everything WWE fans dreamed of: terrifying, dramatic, unforgettable. He stood face to face with The Undertaker, and the world held its breath. But The Undertaker refused to fight him. You see, this wasn't just a storyline feud. This was blood. According to the tale, The Undertaker had left Kane to die in a fire, and now the brother he thought was dead had come back to drag him to hell. For months, WWE built the perfect storm. Paul Bearer fueled the fire with twisted tales of betrayal, abandonment, and revenge. "Your brother knows you're alive," he snarled, "but he never came to see you." The psychological warfare was intense, and Glenn Jacobs poured every ounce of real pain from his past into this broken, vengeful soul. Kane didn't speak, but he didn't need to. His rage said it all. At WrestleMania 14, the two brothers finally collided. The match was brutal, raw, and drenched in years of fictional and very real emotion. Kane lost that night, but what he gained was far more important. He was no longer just a monster. He was a main eventer, and WWE had finally found its next icon. The following month, Kane faced The Undertaker in the first ever Inferno match, a ring surrounded by flames. It was a metaphor made real. Two brothers, born in fire, now trying to burn each other to ashes. Behind the scenes, both Glenn and Mark worried. The flames sucked the oxygen from the ring. Breathing was difficult. One wrong move could have sent either man to the hospital. But the visuals were unforgettable. Kane's arm caught fire, his sleeve doused in accelerant. The image of him stumbling away, flames licking his body, became etched into wrestling history. But as Kane rose in popularity, Glenn Jacobs found himself in a strange position. He was feared on TV, but off-screen, he was known as one of the kindest men in the locker room. He carried The Undertaker's gear. He gave advice to rookies. He never complained, and that was a problem. Backstage, The Undertaker gave him a warning. "If you want to survive here, you need to toughen up. Be selfish when you have to." That conversation was a turning point. Glenn realized that if he didn't fight for his place, WWE would bury him under a pile of gimmicks. He'd worked too hard, suffered too much, to let that happen. Then came his first taste of gold. At King of the Ring 1998, Kane defeated Stone Cold Steve Austin in a first blood match, becoming world champion. But the win was bittersweet. The victory came only because of The Undertaker's accidental interference. And the very next night, Kane lost the title back to Austin. It was like the company gave him a crown and then ripped it away. Was he always destined to live in the shadow of his storyline brother? Kane's struggle for identity became a new war. Fans loved him, but WWE didn't know what to do with him. He bounced between mid-card feuds, comedic segments, and awkward storylines. Then, in a rare moment of vulnerability, they gave Kane a love interest, Tori. He smiled, he showed compassion, he trusted someone, and she betrayed him. Tori left Kane for X-Pac, and suddenly the monster was human. He felt pain, he felt heartbreak, and fans saw themselves in him. Even under a mask, Glenn managed to express emotion, tilting his head like his childhood dog Annie, adding subtle gestures to make Kane feel more real. The psychology was brilliant, but it wasn't enough. Then came one of the most controversial moments in WWE history. In 2002, Triple H accused Kane of necrophilia. The storyline involved a woman named Katie Vick, who supposedly died in a car accident Kane caused. Triple H mocked Kane, even dressing up as him in a funeral home skit involving her corpse. It was tasteless, offensive, and universally hated. Fans were disgusted. Even Glenn later admitted it was the worst moment of his career. But through the garbage, he endured. Why? Because he had to. Because loyalty mattered more than pride. Glenn kept showing up, kept putting on the mask, kept trying to make it work, even when the writing betrayed him. Then in 2003, WWE gave him a chance to reinvent himself again. This time, they made him choose, win the World Championship or unmask. Kane lost, and the mask came off. For the first time, the audience saw the man behind the monster. The moment was surreal. The myth of Kane, the burned demon, was stripped away. What remained was something far more terrifying, a man who had suffered so much he didn't need a mask to be feared. His shaved head, his twisted snarl, his thousand-yard stare, it was enough. But the fans didn't embrace it at first. The mystery was gone. The fear, too. Without the mask, could Kane survive? Could Glenn Jacobs keep the character alive? And then, just when everyone thought the monster had died, he buried the dead. In a shocking turn, Kane interfered in a buried alive match between The Undertaker and Vince McMahon. He dumped 8 tons of dirt on his brother, burying him once and for all. But The Undertaker doesn't rest in peace, does he? Because in the shadows, he was already plotting a return, and Kane's story was about to take its darkest, most emotional turn yet. But what happens when the monster you thought you buried comes back stronger? Buried alive, haunted by ghosts, burned by betrayal, Kane had seen it all, but nothing prepared him for what came next. Because when The Undertaker returned at WrestleMania 20, reborn as the Deadman, he wasn't just coming for revenge. He was coming to force Kane to confront the truth. You can destroy the myth, but what do you do with the man left behind? The return was cinematic. Smoke rolled down the aisle, druids chanted, and out of the mist came The Undertaker, just as he had appeared 6 years before. Kane stood frozen, not with fear, but disbelief. He had buried his brother, he had watched the dirt fall, but somehow, he was back. Their match was forgettable. The moment wasn't. It was a reminder that no matter how far Kane tried to run from his past, he would never escape it. What followed was a string of chaotic storylines that threatened to unravel everything Glenn Jacobs had built. In 2004, Kane became obsessed with Lita. He stalked her, tormented her, and eventually forced her into a storyline marriage after beating her real-life boyfriend Matt Hardy in a winner-gets-the-girl match. The narrative was disturbing, triggering, and hated by many, including Kane himself. "I didn't want my character to go there," he would later admit. "It felt wrong, but I tried to do the best I could with it." That's the thing about Glenn Jacobs. No matter how dark the storyline got, he gave it everything. Even when fans chanted "baby killer" after Lita's on-screen miscarriage, Kane stayed in character, carrying the weight of a story he never wanted. But even the darkest scripts had their silver linings. WWE producers saw his acting talent and offered him the lead role in the horror film See No Evil. Kane played Jacob Goodnight, a tortured soul not unlike the character he had embodied for years. The promotion tied it into a new storyline. Kane began hearing voices, collapsing in the ring, tormented by the date May 19th, the day the movie released, and in WWE lore, the day his family died in the fire. It was a clever return to his roots: fire, trauma, psychological torment. But like many of Kane's stories, it fizzled when it should have flared. The climax involved a Kane imposter played by Luke Gallows. Fans weren't fooled, the emotional punch never landed. Once again, Kane found himself adrift until The Undertaker returned and breathed life back into the Brothers of Destruction. Together, they tore through WWE's roster like it was 1998 all over again. Tag matches, reunions, nostalgia, they reminded the world why they were legends. But it wouldn't last forever. In 2010, Kane reinvented himself once more. He won Money in the Bank and became World Heavyweight Champion. Not through charity, not by fluke, but by force. And in the most poetic turn yet, he defeated The Undertaker in a trilogy of brutal matches, proving once and for all that he wasn't just riding coattails, he was a main event monster on his own merit. But this time, something had changed. Glenn wasn't just Kane anymore. He had mastered the character. Now, he wanted to master something else: reinvention. In 2012, he shocked fans by teaming up with Daniel Bryan to form Team Hell No. They bickered, they hugged, they went to therapy. For a man who once burned people alive, Kane was now making fans laugh, and it worked. Fans adored their chemistry. Behind the mask, Glenn unleashed a new version of Kane, one that could entertain without fear or fire. Bryan credits those segments for helping launch his own rise to the top. And Glenn, he proved he could adapt, evolve, and thrive. By 2014, Glenn was 47. He he wasn't wrestling as much. Instead, he wore a suit, joined the Authority as director of operations, and became a backstage leader. Wrestlers like Cody Rhodes and Chris Jericho called him a mentor. Some even came to him for career advice. But outside the ring, Glenn was planning his next transformation, one that had nothing to do with fire, pain, or violence. In 2017, he announced his candidacy for mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. Even his closest friends were shocked. The Undertaker told him, "Are you bleeping crazy?" But behind that laugh was respect. Glenn had always played the monster. Now, he wanted to be the man who helped others escape their own. Vince McMahon gave his blessing. "That's what you should do," he told him. And in 2018, with 66% of the vote, Glenn Jacobs became mayor. The same man who once terrified audiences with fire and destruction was now fighting for education, infrastructure, and children's health. He visited schools, advocated against bullying, organized charity rides, and supported the kindness revolution. Kids didn't fear him, they high-fived him. In real life, Kane had finally found peace. He made one last in-ring appearance in 2021's Royal Rumble, but never formally retired. Because Glenn Jacobs doesn't need farewells. He already said goodbye when he buried the monster inside. Today, he lives a quiet life. No mask, no flames, just a window in his office that overlooks the Knoxville Civic Auditorium, where he once fought the Undertaker for the very first time. And maybe, on some mornings, he looks out that window and wonders, what if I never put on the mask? What if I gave up after that football injury? What if I never became Kane? He never wanted to be a legend. He just wanted to matter. He did. But now comes the question we all must ask. Was the monster just a mask? Or was it the mirror we were all too afraid to look into?